Imagine this. You've spent your whole life giving your time, your energy, your patience. You've sacrificed for your family, your friends, your career, even strangers. And now, as you enter the later years of your life, you look around and ask yourself, where did all that energy go? And more importantly, who is giving back to me the truth? And it's a hard truth, is that very few people will, because life moves forward. The younger generation is too preoccupied with their own struggles, their own pursuits, their own dreams. And if you spend your old age chasing their validation, trying to insert yourself into their world, you will find yourself bitter, exhausted, and ultimately disappointed. So what do? You focus on yourself throughout life. People pour their energy into others, family, friends, care, and even society. They sacrifice time, effort, and emotions to support those around them, often placing the needs of others before their own. This is natural, even necessary in the earlier stages of life, when responsibilities demand action. Parents dedicate themselves to their children, the power of silence. Professionals devote themselves to their work, and friendships are built on mutual investment. However, as time passes and one enters old age, a realization sets in. Very few people reciprocate the same level of care and concern that was once given. So freely, this can be a painful truth to accept. Many find themselves feeling unappreciated, as though their years of sacrifice have been taken for granted. They may expect gratitude, attention, or even companionship from those they have helped along the way, only to be met with indifference or neglect. The mistake lies in believing that the world will pause to acknowledge their contributions, but life does not work that way. The younger generation is preoccupied with their own struggles, just as the previous generation was. The cycle continues, and the person who spent their years giving must now decide, will they continue depleting themselves, or will they finally choose to invest in their own well-being? Old age is not a time to chase after others or seek validation. It is a time to reclaim what was once given away: energy, peace, and self-respect. This means setting boundaries, refusing to be drained by unnecessary obligations, and letting go of the need to be needed. It means shifting the focus inward. Understanding that there is nothing selfish about prioritizing oneself after years of self-sacrifice. This is the moment to explore long-neglected interests, to take care of one's body and mind, and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life without guilt. Walking alone in nature, reading books that have long sat on the shelf, practicing mindfulness. These acts of self-care are not indulgences, but necessities. In old age, energy becomes a limited resource, and wasting it on those who do not appreciate it is a disservice to oneself. Reclaiming one's ini is not about abandoning others. It is about no longer abandoning oneself. It is the realization that the person most deserving of care, attention, and peace is the one who has spent a lifetime giving it to. Why you should focus on yourself, others. Silence is one of the greatest expressions of wisdom. When people are younger, they feel an overwhelming need to speak, to explain themselves, to prove their worth. Engage in endless debates, try to correct misunderstandings, and hope that by speaking louder or more convincingly, others will finally listen. But as life progresses, a person begins to see the futility in this. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to respond. They are not looking for wisdom, they are looking for validation of their own beliefs. This is where silence becomes powerful. It is not about weakness or passivity, it is about control. Speaking too much is often a sign of insecurity, a need to be heard and accepted. But when a person learns to stay silent, they develop a deeper understanding of the world around them. They start observing instead of reacting. They notice patterns in human behavior, see through the illusions. People create and understand when a conversation is worth engaging in, and when it is not. Most arguments, no matter how logical or well-intended, do not lead to resolution. People cling to their perspectives, unwilling to change, and so the energy spent trying to convince them is energy wasted. As a person grows older, they must ask themselves what is truly worth their time. Engaging in meaningless debates, trying to prove a point to someone who has no intention of listening, explaining their choices to people who have already judged them. The answer is simple: none of it is worth it. The moment one stops feeling the need to explain themselves, they gain an incredible sense of freedom. They no longer get caught in unnecessary conflicts. They no longer feel drained by conversations that lead nowhere. They understand that silence in many cases speaks louder than words ever could. Choosing. Silence does not mean isolation. It means selecting where and how to use one's words. It means understanding that not every thought needs to be verbalized, not every disagreement needs a response, and not every person is worth the effort of explanation. There is wisdom in observing, in waiting, in allowing things to unfold without interference. True power lies not in how much a person speaks, but in how much they understand without having to say a word. Silence, then, is not just an ABS of speech. It is a presence of wisdom. With age comes a new perspective, one that allows a person to step back from the chaos of the world and simply observe. When people are younger, they feel an instinctive need to intervene, to correct, to fix what they perceive as wrong. They want to offer advice, to warn others about their mistakes, to guide them toward a better path. But as time passes, it becomes clear that most people do not want to be guided. They do not want wisdom handed to them. They want to learn their lessons on their own, even if it means making the same mistakes that others have already warned them about. This realization, let go of unnecessary attachments, changes everything. Instead of rushing to correct people, one begins to see the value of silence and detachment. Observing from a distance reveals a deeper understanding of human nature. It becomes clear who is genuine and who is not, who is speaking from insecurity and who is speaking from wisdom. One starts to notice how people reveal their true selves, not through what they say, but through how they act when no one is watching. Trying to interfere in the lives of others, especially in old age, often leads to frustration when advice is given but ignored. It creates unnecessary disappointment when energy is spent trying to change people. It results in exhaustion. People will do what they want, regardless of how much experience or wisdom they have access to. They must go through their own journey, just as those before them did. No amount of explanation can replace personal experience, and sometimes the greatest gift one can give is the space for others to make their own choices, even if those choices lead to failure. Stepping back does not mean a lack of care. It means understanding that not everything is within one's control. It is the ability to watch without feeling the need to direct, to listen without the urge to correct. It is a form of wisdom that allows a person to protect their own peace while still being aware of the world around them, by focusing on observation rather than interference. One learns far more about people than they ever could by constantly engaging. It is in this quiet understanding that true clarity is found, and with that clarity comes a sense of peace that no argument, no advice, and no attempt at control could ever provide. One of the greatest sources of suffering in life comes from the need for approval. People spend years, sometimes decades, shaping their actions and decisions based on how others will perceive them. They seek validation from family, friends, colleagues, and even strangers. This desire to be accepted, to be seen as valuable, is deeply ingrained in human nature, but as time passes, it becomes painfully clear that no amount of external approval can ever bring lasting fulfillment in old age. This realization becomes more important than ever. There comes a point where one must ask, why am I still trying to prove myself after years of experience, lessons and struggles? The need for approve. We should no longer hold power, yet many continue to chase it, fearing rejection or final thoughts, insignificance. They seek appreciation for their past sacrifices, hoping others will acknowledge their worth. But the reality is that people are often too consumed with their own lives to provide the validation that is expected. Waiting for others to recognize one's contributions leads to nothing but disappointment. Letting go of this need is an act of true liberation. It means no longer worrying about how one is perceived, no longer justifying one's choices, and no longer allowing the opinions of others to dictate personal happiness. It is understanding that self-worth is not something that comes from extra praise. It is something that comes from within. In old age, the only opinion that truly matters is one's own. Many fear that prioritizing themselves means becoming selfish or distant, but in reality it means becoming free. It means choosing peace over unnecessary conflict, personal happiness over unrealistic expectations, and self-respect over the exhausting pursuit of approval. There is a profound sense of relief in realizing that it is not necessary to please everyone. Not everyone will understand, not everyone will appreciate, and not everyone will agree, and that is perfectly fine. This stage of life should not be spent seeking recognition. It should be spent embracing one's own truth. The sooner one releases the need for approval, the sooner they can live fully. Without regrets, true peace is found not in being understood by others, but in understanding oneself. And once this is achieved, there is no longer a need to explain, to seek validation, or to be anything other than what one truly is. As life progresses, it becomes clear that personal well-being is not a luxury. It is a necessity in youth. People often neglect their own needs, believing that they have unlimited time and energy. They prioritize work, family, and social obligations, often at the expense of their own health and peace of mind. But in old age, there is no longer room for such neglect. The body and mind require care, not as an afterthought, but as the central focus of daily life. Without this, the later years can become a period of decline rather than a time of fulfillment. Taking care of one's well-being means making intentional choices that promote both physical and mental health. The body, after decades of use, demands respect. Regular movement, nourishing food, and sufficient rest are no longer optional. They are essential for maintaining independence and quality of life. Many people assume that aging naturally brings weakness, but much of this decline comes from years of neglect. Those who continue to engage in physical activity, who remain mindful of their diet, and who make an effort to stay active in their daily lives, often maintain their strength far longer than those who resign. Be themselves too. In activity, mental well-being is just as crucial. The later years of life should not be filled with stress, unnecessary worries, or draining relationships. This is the time to choose peace over chaos, to surround oneself with things that bring joy rather than frustration. Reading, engaging in meaningful conversations, spending time in nature, and pursuing hobbies that bring fulfillment all contribute to a sharp and healthy mind. Dwelling on past regrets, engaging in unnecessary conflicts, or holding on to resentment robs a person of the peace they deserve. Many people spend their younger years caring for others at their own expense, but in old age, this pattern must change. The world will continue moving forward, and those who do not prioritize themselves will find that no one else will do it for them. There is no reason to waste energy on relationships that drain, on activities that bring stress, or on responsibilities that no longer serve a meaningful purpose. The greatest act of self-respect is recognizing that well-being is not selfish. It is essential, choosing to care for oneself. both physically and mentally, is not only a way to extend life, but also a way to ensure that every remaining moment is lived with dignity, purpose, and peace. At a certain point in life, a realization sets in: if you don't prioritize yourself, no one else will. People spend years, sometimes their entire lives, putting others first, believing that their sacrifices will be remembered, that their kindness will be reciprocated, and that their presence will always be valued. But time has a way of revealing difficult truths as people move on with their own lives. The person who once gave LLY often finds themselves overlooked. The energy that was once poured into others is rarely returned in the same measure. This is not a reason to be bitter, but it is a reason to wake up in old age. The greatest responsibility one has is to themselves. There is no reward for neglecting personal happiness for the sake of others, who may not even notice the effort if a person does not choose the me's, if they do not seek their own peace, well-being and fulfillment. Then they will be left with nothing but regret. The later years of life should not be spent waiting for appreciation, validation, or companionship from people who are too distracted by their own concerns. Instead, they should be spent embracing self-sufficiency and learning to enjoy one's own company. Choosing oneself does not mean becoming selfish. It means recognizing that there is nothing wrong with prioritizing personal joy, health, and peace. It means setting boundaries with people who only take without giving. It means stepping away from relationships that no longer bring value. It means pursuing the things that bring happiness without needing permission or approval from anyone else. Too many people spend their final years feeling used, exhausted, or forgotten because they never learned how to put themselves first. But there is power in choosing differently. The reality is that life does not slow down for anyone. If a person continues to wait for others to prioritize them, they will be waiting forever. The only real control they have is over their own actions, their own mindset, and their own decisions in old age. This truth becomes undeniable. Happiness is not something that is given. It is something that must be taken, and the sooner one accepts this, the sooner they can live their remaining years with the peace, freedom, and self-respect they truly deserve.